I want to start by welcoming everyone today. Thank you for taking time to come and learn about AI and sleep. So AI has fundamentally been transforming a lot of our novel habits and behaviors. And here we're going to be examining the intersection between the two. So when we look at the ways that AI can be transforming sleep, we see things like sleep being staged better than an expert. We see how AI tools can help us create better insomnia interventions, how we can create better experiments and do distributed neuroscience thanks to AI, and identify biomarkers. Today, we have a panel of experts who will cover all of those topics and more, beginning first with explaining what is AI, how does it work, and then moving into how it applies to sleep, some examples, and how you might see it play out in your own life, in your own research. We have three esteemed speakers with us today. We have Dr. Rebecca Robillard. Dr. Robillard is a clinical neuroscientist who co-chairs the Canadian Sleep Research Consortium, and she directs clinical sleep research at the Institute of Mental Health Research at the Royal Sleep Laboratory and the University of Ottawa. Her team investigates the interaction between mental health, the sleeping brain, and the sleeping heart, with particular attention to mood disorders and PTSD. Her work seems to optimize sleep chronobiology interventions for people with mental disorders and identify neural markers in sleep. We also have with us today Chris Aimone. Chris is a phenomenal expert in machine learning, AI, and signal processing. He's the author of multiple patents in EEG and AI, including using AI to decode EEG data and different methods of cloud data processing. And finally, we have Maurice, who's going to be our first speaker today. Maurice Abou-Jaoued is a neuroengineer by training and a research scientist at Interaxon. There he leads the development of AI-powered digital biomarkers using the Muse wearable headband. Prior to that, Maurice worked at Massachusetts General Hospital on developing AI algorithms to decode brain activity in patients with epilepsy and sleep, and he carried out his graduate thesis at the Harvard Medical School as a Bertarelli Fellow. First, I'd like to welcome to the stage Maurice. Please turn on your camera and your microphone.
Hi, Ariel, and thank you for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here to talk about AI and its application for sleep science, because I've been a strong believer in the power of AI since I got introduced to it several years ago, especially when it comes to changing healthcare. And really, AI is not a new concept. It's not even a concept from this century. The term AI was actually coined in the 1950s. And in its simplest terms, AI is when you make a computer perform a task that typically requires human intelligence. And okay, why would you want to do that? Well, mainly because a computer is faster, cheaper, scales better, and in some cases is actually better at performing the task itself than a human. And AI really touches many aspects of our lives right now, from Google Maps giving you directions, or Alexa understanding what you're saying and replying to you, to the personalized ads that you see on social media platform. AI is really everywhere right now.
AI really is everywhere. So thanks for giving us a little introduction or a taste of what is AI. Can you now share how AI actually works? What are the algorithms or mechanisms behind it?
To build an AI system that does a task that a human intelligence requires, you will require actually a human to teach the AI how to do that task. And there are basically two ways that a human can do this. So the first way is technically what we called supervised learning, is where the human shows the computer data and their associated label. What does that mean? That means, for example, you can show the computer many different examples of X-ray images. And then you show the computer if there's a fracture in the X-ray. So the image would be the data and the fracture would be the label. And by seeing many, many examples of X-rays and where the fracture is, then the AI will learn by itself to identify fractures giving an X-ray in the future. And here, really, you are supervising the AI in its learning process. That's why it's called supervised learning. But there's another way of doing it, which we call unsupervised or self-supervised learning. And basically this works by giving lots and lots of data to the computer, but without any labels. So you show them a lot of images of chest x-rays or cats or I don't know what, and the computer will learn by itself, by looking at all this data, to identify patterns and embed a deep understanding of that data. For example, large language models like ChatGPT, they were made to look at huge amount of text, and so they can embed a deep statistical representation of language. And that's really the secret of how these large language models have a really good understanding of language. You can also combine these two modes, the unsupervised and the supervised modes of teaching an AI. So first you get an AI model to look at the data in an unsupervised way to get a really good internal representation and understanding of the data. And then you use supervised learning to make it learn a certain specific task.
Okay, cool. So what I'm hearing is AI can work in two modes. You have supervised machine learning, where you have an expert adding labels, and then the machine creates a pattern or an algorithm out of that. And then you have unsupervised learning, where you simply throw it a whole bunch of data and wait to see what it discovers, the patterns that emerge from that data analysis.
Yeah, that's totally correct.
Okay, awesome. So we have an understanding of how AI works. Now, can you walk us through how AI is applied to sleep?
Oh, wow. There are many ways AI is applied to sleep, but I guess the most popular way, the most popular application is to automate what we call sleep scoring. So what's that? So clinically, if you want to assess the quality of your sleep and whether you have any sleep disorders, you needed to go to a sleep clinic and do what we call PSG, or polysomnography. So what happens is that you will be hooked up with a bunch of sensors, including EEG, to measure your brain activity. And you will sleep at the clinic overnight. So, and the next day, a sleep technologist will come and look at your PSG data, will look at your brain data and all the other data coming from the sensors, and will assign for each 30-second segment of your sleep a certain sleep stage. Are you awake? Are you in N1, N2, N3, or in REM? And you get something we call a hypnogram. And it goes without saying that this whole process is really cumbersome. It takes time and it costs a lot of money. But AI has actually changed the way this is done. So now, instead of needing to go to a sleep clinic to measure your brain signals overnight, you can use a wearable device to measure your biosignals at home. And instead of needing a human technologist to analyze your sleep, now an AI that is living on your phone or in the cloud can score your sleep as accurately as a human expert and give you in seconds a deep analysis of your sleep. And I think this really changes the game for sleep research, as it really makes it cheaper, faster, and really very, very scalable.
Amazing. So we just heard how in the past you would go into a sleep lab and there'd have to be a clinician hand score the data. And now AI can score that sleep, give you the hypnogram or the stages of sleep as effectively as an expert might have. Now, this kind of begs the question, is there the opportunity for AI to do even better than the expert? And for that, I want to throw that question to Chris. If you want to join us on screen.
Sure. Throw me the tough ones. Hey, everyone. I love this question. I think, maybe one idea that we can just hold is that, one thing that computers are really good at is processing huge amounts of information quickly and remembering a lot of things. And I think, if I look at the innovations that have happened in AI recently, what we've actually figured out how to do is how do we, make use of such a large amount of information and to create models that actually have that information embedded within them. And so I think, if we look at this applied to sleep, there's a huge opportunity to do beyond what a human might be able to do, just because we're able to have algorithms that can consider in every moment, this huge, library of examples of EEG, that's been collected over the years. And so the ability to reference so much information really is a huge power. The other thing is, if we look at kind of the history of the sleep stages that we use for a lot of our, clinical sleep analysis, it's there are 5 stages of sleep, and I think the first question I had for us was, is that all there is? Is there actually more going on than these basic sleep stages? I mean, the brain is obviously very, very complicated in how it functions. And then the other thing is when we look at the data, if we look at the way that sleep is scored, we have these 30-second windows of EEG time series data, which are basically voltages over time. And then there's a set of scoring rules. And these haven't changed for a long, long time. And they are based from the days of chart recorders, where 30 seconds was how long your chart recorder was. And then you could come up with a simple rule set of how you'd classify sleep to be one thing or another. And so, you'd come up with a hypnogram that looks a lot like what we have on the screen here, where we have these 5 different classes. And then, whether it's a clinician or a computer, they would be dividing the sleep data in each moment into one class or another. So, in the work that we've been doing, training AIs to look at this data, one thing we've been able to do is really take a data-driven look at the sleep space. And what we find, no surprise, is that there is a lot more to sleep topology than just 5 different classes of sleep. In fact, there's really a sleep continuum, that we can see here. And being able to take a more nuanced look at the sleep data allows us to get more insight into what is happening in someone's sleep than just looking at these discrete 5 stages. So I think this opens up a lot of really amazing opportunities. We'll talk about those, but in our experience so far, it's been amazing how, just going back and forth between experts and looking what the AI is doing, once we start to take this very data-centric view of the data, I mean, we can actually see when an expert is making an error because of how things, lay out in the sleep space.
That is completely fascinating. Okay, so Chris and Maurice have taken us through some very heady, pun unintended, I'm sorry, some very heady stuff where we look theoretically about how sleep is scored and how AI functions. I would love to bring this down to the practical. Maurice, could you actually come on board, please, and walk us through an implementation of this system? What does it look like? What's capturing the data? Where does it go? And how does it actually work?
All right, cool. Sure. I mean, before being interested in AI, I've always been interested in wearable devices because I've always believed that wearable technology is going to make health tracking more accessible to everyone. And there are a number of solutions out there. But now I work for Interaxon, and who have made a wearable headband called the Muse S that you see right there in the slides. So the Muse S is a wearable headband that collects your brain data using a 4-channel EEG sensors, also collects your heart data using a PPG sensor, as well as your temperature and your movements using accelerometer and gyroscope sensors. And really, you can do a lot of things by looking at the data coming from these sensors, from real-time expert-level sleep staging to help you meditate, to track your health, and to measures of your heart and your heart rate variability. But recently, Muse has evolved from being a platform to track your health and your personal vitals to actually an AI platform that lets you deploy real-time experimental protocols and gather all this data. So the headband is connected to a mobile app, which is a really flexible platform for deploying therapeutic content. And this started so at Muse, we were really interested in helping people with insomnia through real-time protocols. So that's how we started deploying protocols in the app. But now researchers are using this platform to deploy experiments, gather sleep brain data, heart data, movement data, and the outputs of AI models on the Muse data to do research at large scale.
That's amazing. Okay, so we have a platform, and there are many others that are out there. This is the one that we built, so we're talking about it as an example, but obviously there are more to discover. So you have a platform and you have a lot of data that's being gathered in this platform. What can you do with all this data, and how does AI actually help us with the analysis, classification, and making use of all that data?
Oh, yeah. So great question, because data is the foundation of AI. Without data, you can't do AI. And really having lots and all this data opens up a lot of opportunities. But for me, being a bioengineer, the area I'm most particularly excited about is the area of digital biomarker discovery. So the same way large language models are trained on large amount of text to learn a deep statistical representation of language, we can train large neural networks on large amounts of EEG data to learn a deep statistical representation of brain activity. We call these large brain models, LBMs, like LLMs. And once you have a model that has this kind of embedded knowledge, you can then use supervised learning to teach it to perform a certain task or mine for biomarkers. And the advantage of using this, of pre-training your model, of having this big foundational model, is that since you're starting with an AI model that has a good understanding of EEG, when you want to do supervised learning, you now need much less labeled data in order for your model to perform well.
Okay, so that's a really important point. Coming at this as a researcher, the amount of labeled data you have is sometimes limited. So in studies, you're desperately trying to get in as many participants as your budget and facilities will allow, but you often only have a small number of participants, hopefully enough to create, statistical power or significance to your outcomes. How is AI potentially overcoming that problem?
Yeah, that's true. So in like healthcare and clinical data, we often has this problem of not enough sample size, especially when it comes to clinical population. But with this approach, we can create really powerful generalizable AIs. Like this, again, because now you have a deep understanding of EEG activity already in the AI model. So now we're going to have a powerful generalizable AI biomarker detector without having to run studies with 10,000 people. Because now we're building on top of a deeply trained AI model that works for many people. For example, here in this slide, for example, you can see the performance evolution of deep learning models as a function of how much data you have. So you see, obviously this is going up because the more data you have, the better performance you can get from your model. And this is a bit complicated slide, but again, the message that I want you to have here from this graph is that if you look at the blue lines, which represent the performance of foundational models that were pre-trained, and then now you're fine-tuning using supervised learning, you can see that they are more quickly able to learn and achieve better performance early on in the graph. So early on, when you have few labeled examples, you get much better performance. And you can use this approach whether you're mining for biomarkers, looking for disease biomarkers, or just looking to do automated sleep scoring.
That's amazing. So using AI, a small amount of data can get you an assumption that could be generalizable to the overall public.
That is true. Assuming you have a model that's been trained on a lot of data and that embeds a really good understanding of brain activity, which we can now because we have all this data and these advances in AI self-supervised techniques.
Okay, so putting on my skeptical hat here, if I'm a researcher and I'm doing a study on a small population and we use this large AI model, a whole bunch of brain data gives us the indication that we can build an algorithm based only on a small population. How does this then go and get validated? How do we actually validate that these assumptions and models and sleep stage algorithms that we come up with actually work? I think this is a great time to bring up Rebecca. Dr. Robillard, please come to the stage. I would love for you to share some of your experience in validating AI sleep staging models.
Sure. Thanks, Ariel. And I guess I'll start by just disclosing that I think that's part of that question of how do we validate. I think that how do we validate is we validate independently. So I'll start with my conflicts of interest disclosure. I'm receiving no financial support specifically from Muse. So the data that I'm about to show you have been collected independently from the Interaxon team. I really just genuinely got very excited at the venue of these wearable EEG devices that would open up so many doors. So I wanted to do my part to help, assess, validate, and hopefully make this more accessible for the scientific community. So I guess if we can move to the next slide. So we conducted an independent validation study, and we're literally days away from submission. Basically, what we have collected so far is a sample of 47 adult males and females from the community and the university. What you can see here on the screen is are some participants and research assistants doing this setup so that we could do basically simultaneous sleep recording with both the Muse S device and standard sleep monitoring in terms of level 1 polysomnography. In this case, we used the EMBLA native system. And so people were wearing both systems at the same time while they were sleeping so that we could do that cross-validation looking at how the signals actually compared. And the Muse data was scored with the automated sleep staging algorithms that Chris and Maurice talked about a bit earlier. Whereas the level 1 polysomnography was scored by a registered sleep technologist who was completely blind to any of the sleep scoring from the automated algorithm. We can move on to the next slide. And I guess as a scientist, the first thing I wanted to look at is the actual raw data. And I think that's a fantastic kind of thing to have with the Muse as well, which is not always easy to get with other ambulatory devices. For us, it's very nice to be able to access high-level high-tech automated scoring algorithms, but us scientists tend to hate those black boxes, so we want to see the real thing. So I'll give you just a few examples. This is a screenshot. They will all have the same layout, whereby the top in white you have the recording from the standard polysomnography in the lab, and below you have at the exact same time the signal that was picked up by the Muse device. So here you can see in wake, we can see the alpha being picked up quite nicely by the Muse, as was reflected by the PSG. Next slide. Nicely in N2 and non-REM 2 stage, we can see the spindles as well visually arising in the Muse signal in the different derivations. So that's quite nice and reassuring to see that they're matching the locations of what we're seeing in the standard PSG. Next slide. We're capturing pretty nicely and thoroughly these large slow waves that are characteristic of non-REM 3 sleep or slow wave sleep. So kind of similar in terms of what we can see in the differential for the amplitude and the frequencies. So quite reassuring as well. And next slide, please. And even REM, so we can capture the rapid eye movements as well pretty clearly. So I guess for Muse, because there's no electrodes directly placed under the eyes, we're able to kind of make inferences based on combinations of other signals. But again, the signals were pretty convincing as compared to what we were seeing in PSG. Next slide. So that's what we were seeing visually, but then in terms of numbers, it was quite nice to see the accuracy of Muse staging with the automated scoring algorithm was ranging above 87% for all sleep stages and reaching all the way up to 96% for certain sleep stages like REM or even for wake detection. And as you can see on these Blunt-Altman plots, there's also pretty good trade-off between sensitivity and specificity as well. Next slide, please. And in terms of Cohen's kappa, you can see the table here. They're pretty impressive and kind of aligned with what has been published in terms of other types of EEG devices that are no longer accessible or difficult to access. But basically, we have a Cohen's kappa of 0.76 for all epochs combined, so regardless of sleep stages. And of course, it varies a little bit from one stage of sleep to the other. So pretty good kappa for wake detection. We're dropping a little bit, which is to be expected for non-REM 1 sleep with a kappa that's still in the fair range. And I think that's an area where we'll be working to try to improve. But, you know, I guess everyone knows that N1 is pretty kind of tough sleep stage to get. But then we're going back up in the substantial agreement range for both non-REM 2 and non-REM 3 sleep, and further increasing to the near perfect agreement range for REM sleep. So we're now working on assessing how Muse signals hold the road in terms of how they compare to standard PSG. If we look at not just sleep stages, but quantified EEG metrics like spectral analysis, for example, and spindle detections and slow wave or slow oscillations detections. So that's upcoming. And another important next step, I think, that we'll be working towards, I know this is underway, is kind of expanding the validation sample, both in terms of size, but also in terms of diversity, because I think it's really important when looking at different instruments for measuring sleep that we consider that sleep changes drastically, you know, from between men and women across the lifespan, across as well, you know, different sleep profiles. If we look at the different, the multitude of sleep disorders that are out there, we think it's really important to kind of go the extra step of seeing how Muse is well adapted to that, and if not, then working towards making it a good tool to be used in these clinical populations. And just to give you an idea, we already have a preliminary sample of people with sleep apnea that have used the Muse at the same time as level 1 standard polysomnography and found pretty similar results than the ones that I've just showed you today, but this will be upcoming shortly. And on that, I'll end there.
Thank you, Dr. Robillard. That was totally amazing. So this is evidence about the reliability of using an AI for these systems. And as we've just learned, we are always continuing to train and improve the AIs. This leads me to a question that somebody just put in the chat. I'm going to bring up Chris Amony to answer this one. So Chris, in the chat, somebody just had a question.
What you got?
Awesome. So the user, as a Muse user, is the data it gathers kept securely and confidentially, or is it used to train the AI?
So that's a great question. We, you know, in the years that we've kind of been around, we've had a process where people can agree to have their data used for research purposes. And where that's sort of evolved to now is the data when it's coming into our service, it's anonymized. There's a way for us to do training on data like up in the server on anonymized data. And I think this is answering your question, but there is a way for us to access data that people are using in an anonymized in an anonymized fashion.
Awesome. So if you have said, yes, my data can be used for research purposes, then your data goes up anonymized to the cloud, and the system is used to learn about the brain, but not on any individual basis, to do it as a conglomerate of the data, and it's all anonymized. Awesome. Thank you. I thought it was important to stop and look at that question, because certainly when we talk about AI, privacy and use of data is incredibly important. And it's also very important to us that it's all very transparent, and that we are using the highest levels of data privacy and security and privacy by design approaches. I see a few more questions in the chat. Somebody curious if their Muse can help you diagnose complex sleep apnea. I'm going to hold on that question, and we're going to dive for a moment into the various things that you can do once you have an automated sleep staging algorithm. So we have a system, it stages sleep, it can do it in real time. And what next? Chris, can you take that one away, please?
Like, is that a question for me?
That's a question for you.
We've always been interested in what is possible when you can have a closed loop system. So basically, you could be wearing a wearable device that captures brain activity. If you can interpret that data real time, what are the ways that you can participate with someone's consciousness to help them in some process? And this could be, if you look at our work in meditation, this might be helping someone learn focused attention meditation. In sleep, the first thing that we were super interested in was seeing if we can make a difference in helping people go to sleep if they're having trouble, or if you are waking up in the middle of the night, getting back to sleep. So I think there's a lot of things we could talk about, but I'm going to use kind of that idea as sort of a place to start, and then maybe we can hear from some others in our group here. So what we were interested in is, in particular, this transition from a wakeful state into sleep. And typically, when that happens, we go through the N1 stage, which is really a semi-conscious sleep state. So if someone were to say, "Hey, you sleeping?" you might say, "No, I'm awake." But in reality, you're probably partially asleep, if you're in this realm. So often people call this the hypnagogic state. And what tends to happen with a lot of people who are having trouble going to sleep is they get stuck trying to get through this hypnagogic state. As you're falling asleep, you lose a lot of cognitive control, thoughts and emotions come up, and that can really spiral us into higher states of arousal, because they're triggering to us in some way, or provocative to us in some way. And so we took a cue from how people would tend to use sleep stories or even movies or television to help them fall asleep, in that you would tend to be able to have an experience where you are attaching your sort of inner narratives and emotions to something else. And that can be quite relieving. It can help you fall asleep. Generally, it wakes you back up again, because obviously there's an ongoing stimulus. So people use things like sleep timers and whatnot to stop their podcast or whatever they're listening to sort of complete that sleep aid approach. So what we were looking at is that, plus how if you're a parent and you have a young child, what you tend to do if you're trying to put a child to sleep by reading. And that is, you pay very close attention to what's happening, for your child, and to adapt how you're engaging with them based upon what you're observing in their behavior. So we've sort of taken, if you want to go back a couple of slides, Ariel, or who's got control? Okay, I can just speak to this. So if we take a look at this cartoon-like drawing here, this is kind of representing what it's like to fall asleep. So you have wake up here, and you're really trying to descend down into this safe unconsciousness of sleep. And what tends to happen for a lot of people is we end up on this roller coaster, and we'll end up back awake again. And this is this, being emotionally triggered, situation. So what we do is we actually take a look at the sleep brain states that are surrounding, both within and surrounding that hypnagogic state. And so we come up with a means to actually adjust the experience of storytelling. So you're listening to a story. Once you see that someone is susceptible for falling asleep, you're getting closer to sleep, you can actually create more space in the story. You can insert long pauses between paragraphs. You can slow down, get quieter. A lot of the things that you might imagine doing, for reading somebody to sleep, like a child. And so we actually have a system like this that is deployed in the Muse app for our customers that leverage this really cool way of using real-time sleep data, sleep analysis beyond the 5 stages of sleep to try to create this kind of feedback experience where essentially it's like you're almost tricking the brain in going to sleep. So you see that someone is getting into that dozy state. As soon as you see like a dip into a deeper sleep state, you stop all stimulation. And that creates an amazing sleep opportunity where often people just go to sleep at that point. If you pop out again, then we can bring the story back right in that moment and sort of continue on this journey. So this is something that we find very cool. It's really effective for the people who use the Muse for this. It really helps them go to sleep. And I think it's a great example of how having this kind of, advanced real-time data can start to open up some brand new possibilities in how we work with people in their sleep.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm seeing lots of buzz in the chat and also people sending messages directly to me. The question is, once you have this kind of real-time experience, can you play a tone or a noise when somebody's in deep sleep to enhance their sleep? I will answer it very, very quickly, and then I want to jump off onto Rebecca.
You want me to answer this question? Well, the simple answer is yeah. And I think that's the exciting thing. And I'm hoping that at the end of this, this webinar, we can start that conversation of things that are possible. But there's a lot that we can do now, including things like stimulation in deep sleep to enhance slow waves.
Amazing. So I would like to bring Dr. Robillard back up to talk about some of the work that she is doing and some of the studies that she and the Canadian Sleep Consortium have planned using these kinds of advanced interactive features.
Thank you. So I guess we can move on to the next slide. So indeed, the Canadian Sleep Research Consortium, which regroups a lot of scientists across Canada that are focused on sleep, our groups are starting more and more to integrate portable EEG headbands in our studies. And I'll showcase some examples here in the realm of insomnia, where I think there's a lot of benefits to be gained. I think that it's typically in insomnia research will often use either subjective reports, which I think are still very, very important, but can remain challenging for many reasons. Or we might have crude, rather large and rough estimates of sleep based, for example, on actigraphy, which might not be the best for that population, or the gold standard polysomnography, but oftentimes it's difficult to do it more than one time or a couple of times. So it tends to be kind of static in time, whereby we know that disorders like insomnia might be quite dynamic temporally. So, just to kind of break that down a little bit, I think that, in most studies, again, the fact that we're focusing on, for example, one single night of polysomnography or at a couple of time points across clinical trials, for example, I think we're missing out on, the key factor of the night-to-night variability that is so important for many people. And we often, hear the story of people with insomnia coming to a sleep clinic to get, assessed. And then, because we take them out of their usual sleeping environment and into the sleep lab, they're having the best night of their lives where, they were here to show how they're not sleeping. So I think that, there's the kind of the value of being able to kind of track people with a device like Muse on kind of multiple days, as well as, being able to, delve into people's bedrooms, get out of the artificial lab environment that is that we usually have in our sleep labs, with all the many wires and the staff that's there monitoring people, and the fact that people don't have that usual environment to sleep in usually. And I think that's really important, especially for insomnia, because again, we see that in many cases, people start developing some conditioning about their sleeping environment, and that is part of the issue. So I think that there's great value in terms of measuring sleep objectively in people's usual sleep environments. And I think, there's, I'm putting here the kind of classical sleep diary or sleep log versus the Muse here. I think that's, and I don't mean that in a kind of a big battle way, but I think, because I think we still need both. We need absolutely the subjective perspective, but the reality is that, that subjective input that we're getting from people on the sleep log is one time consuming and cumbersome for some people, but is also quite stressful and anxiogenic to some degree, because a lot of these people, especially people with insomnia, might have some difficulties estimating their sleep in a precise way. We see oftentimes people kind of being a little bit outside of what reality might be in terms of what we're measuring objectively. And sometimes people know that, and that could be a specific concern, especially when we're thinking about some classical insomnia interventions, whereby we're actively using the sleep diary to inform the treatment on a day-to-day basis, so that we kind of tailor the intervention to the person's sleep. But if we tailor it based on, the person's self-report that is to some degree biased to start up with, then, the treatment might not be optimal. So in one, I'll single out one study that we're currently running, whereby we're having two groups of insomniacs, that one group that will go through the standard route of doing cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBT, and that is informed by the sleep diary, versus another group whereby the same treatment, CBTI, is informed by data that's collected from the Muse on a daily basis. And so basically every week, people in the Muse group, if you want, will receive a report that kind of summarizes all the measurements that were done from the Muse, and not just as we would in the typical kind of sleep diary. We're focusing on crude metrics like, how long have you been sleeping? How long did it take you to fall asleep? So we get all of these things, but importantly, we also get information about sleep architecture, which I think has been understudied in the context of insomnia, in terms of the day-to-day changes that we might see during the treatment as well, and how that might speak to some of the underlying processes and mechanisms that might be involved in that treatment. So I think that, beyond just the plain kind of sleep monitoring options that this type of devices bring in terms of pre-post treatment, there's a lot of interest, at least on our side, in seeing how this could be leveraged to then facilitate the process and optimize the process of delivering the intervention foresight. So we're here taking the bet of, perhaps having those objective measures during treatment like cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia might increase treatment acceptability and satisfaction, and reduce some level of anxiety in participants. And next slide, please. And so I guess it is still early days. I don't have quantitative data to show you, but our first participant just completed the full study, and she was kind enough to consent for me to share some of the results from her perspective in terms of her feedback of how it was doing the CBTI treatment for insomnia with the Muse. So first questions, one of the first questions we had is, how was your experience filling out the sleep diary to determine your sleep window during the treatment? And her answer was, sometimes, unfortunately, was busy in the morning and I didn't get to do it until later in the day. Sometimes I had a little difficulty. You do your best as you can, as close to waking up. But there were times I was like, yes, I'm kind of guessing a little bit. So we sense that kind of uncertainty about, basing the treatment solely on the sleep diary. Next slide, please. And then we asked, how is it to sleep with the EEG headband? And I guess that's an important question, because we also within the sleep community, there was a lot of concerns about, how are people going to actually fare with the headbands, especially people with sleep disorders who might be extra sensitive to these types of sensory disturbances. And her response was straight up, fairly brief and fairly to the point. She was saying, like, there's no worries, no complaints about the comfort, none. Next slide, please. And I mean, that is, of course, n equals 1. So, of course, there might be some people who might have different experiences with Muse, but we'll continue to collect data and see how, if there's any adaptations that could be made on that front. I guess this is the core question. How informative was the EEG headband data during your insomnia treatment? So as I mentioned, she was receiving daily, not daily, but weekly reports fed by the Muse data, and she knew that it was coming from the Muse data. And so her answer were quite elaborate here, but I think there's a lot of interesting information there. I love that you got that concrete data from my body. It's just so cool. It was just amazing, the data that you were able to pull. I love the learning part about that, the deep sleep, the REM, how much I was awake. It was so informative. It's just so nice to get that professional information. I go to a sleep clinic, they print out a document, and it's like I'm reading foreign language. This was just so clear. This being the reports that she was getting from the Muse, very user-friendly as far as your reports. And the data from the headband was accurate. Mine, the sleep diary, was based on what I think and feel, and maybe I think I recall. So you're able to compare and have the accurate base and determine the accurate outcome. We sometimes over-exaggerate sometimes, or magnify things. Sometimes I'm like shocked when I see that I was awake for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I'm like, oh my God. And then there are other times I thought I was up longer, and then it was only 35 minutes. So I guess that really points to our suspicion that, and that has been documented in the past, that especially people with insomnia might have difficulties estimating their subjective sleep patterns. So basically imposing on them to, one, go through the trouble of doing that, and two, letting them know that the whole treatment is relying on that. It can be really stressful and perhaps not so optimal. Can we move to the next slide, please? And then we asked her, if you had a choice in the beginning, would you have preferred to base your treatment on the headband or on the sleep diary? And she said straight up, oh God, the headband. Accuracy. So accuracy was something that she really kind of valued. And so it'll be interesting to get other people's perspective as we go along with this. And I think there's a lot of things to consider, a lot of things to think about and be careful with as well. Of course, we're thinking about orthosomnia and the kind of the anxiety that could be driven by, the focus on the device itself. And I think that as a community, in terms of sleep medicine and sleep research, we need to do more and more work in terms of not just discarding technology, but seeing how we can accompany people in a way to use that technology in a safe and efficient manner. Next slide, please. Another project that we're right now working on in close collaboration with Chris and Maurice and all the team is we designed and built a new application that I call the Sleep Controller. We'll see how that evolves. But this is a nice example, I think, of how AI really kind of helps us move to the next stage. Because Muse can determine sleep stages in a live manner in a closed loop system, and then allow us to do precise manipulations during and around sleep based on these sleep stages, it really opens up the door to many new things that we could do, or old things that we were attempting to do previously, but that we could do in a much more efficient manner here. So we're about to test this application. Actually, we're starting on Friday. this sleep control, and the vision is really that we could create some sort of a live controller that we could use to manipulate sleep. So, for example, as you're seeing here on the slide, we could target deep sleep or N3 and N4 sleep or slow wave sleep specifically. So, as soon as the headband detects that the person is entering deep sleep, we would send an auditory stimulation, for example, or we could target REM sleep, so that stage of sleep where we have typically those vivid dreams. And send the stimulation there. The stimulation could be to wake up the person to do, for example, selective sleep deprivation, which historically has been really informative to really assess the relative contribution of sleep stages for various areas of functioning. For example, if I deprive you of that non-REM sleep, like how are you going to cope in terms of different cognitive functions and memory and whatnot? So I think there's a lot of benefits to gain from that type of tool to be able to use in research now. We could also use that for targeted stimulations during REM to facilitate dream recall or lucid dreaming as well, and train people to become aware that they're dreaming during their sleep if we're doing kind of sub-awakening threshold stimulations. This can be used for napping optimization. We can count down how many, how much time people have spent in different sleep stages and say like, okay, now is the right time to wake up. So there's many different sleep applications I think that we could derive from that, and that's just kind of one of many examples. And I guess I spoke for too long. I'll stop there.
Rebecca, there's no such thing as too long. Your talks and your insights are absolutely fascinating. So thank you very, very much. We are at 1:54, and so I'd like to now throw it out to questions from the audience. I see a number of questions that had come in earlier about the kind of targeted memory reactivation, deep sleep stimulation. So somebody's wondering, can I actually enhance my deep sleep? And I will bring Chris up to the screen to go into a little bit more detail about how you would do things like deep sleep stimulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, Ariel. I think I have like a slide that might help if you want to step
Sure.
down in the slide list. So actually, why don't you? Okay, so this is actually a pretty good slide. So basically, the way that you set something up here is, you will have your subject or yourself, wearing the EEG device. The data is being live streamed to a computing platform. In this case, it's a mobile device. It's showing the Muse research application, which is sort of a variant of the consumer app that people use for sleep and meditation. And you can put your protocols in there. So when someone's actually going through their stages of sleep in the night, however you like to travel in that universe, we can have specific states, be it in REM, be it in deep sleep, and use this as target criteria to create a stimulus. And then when we detect these states, we actually create a real-time stimulus back to the individual. And this actually happens through the app. There's like a really cool sound engine in there where you can design like really interesting stimuli or send the data out and change like your room temperature or something like that. So it's possible to do like auditory cues as well as other kinds of cues for people. This diagram, if you go back to that, is actually describing one really interesting kind of protocol where you can actually influence somebody's dreams with some active priming. So what you do is during the day, you'll actually do some kind of visualization or guided meditation, something to kind of upload something for your dreams, and you would associate particular sounds that can be presented when you're in a dream state. And what tends to happen there is you tend to bring back some of that practiced experience into your dreams. You can do a similar thing where you actually present a cue in a similar way in your slow wave sleep that actually leads to memory consolidation. So I think the research community is just starting to scratch the surface of what's possible here, but you can create some pretty cool, sophisticated protocols when we can start to play with some of these things and see how they help people.
Awesome. Chris, that was totally fascinating. And there are a number of questions in the chat also around the hypnagogic state. Maybe you could speak to that for a brief moment. How long is the hypnagogic state? And if somebody's been experiencing night terrors, might those be during the hypnagogic state or later?
Yeah, I mean, I would love Dr. Robillard to talk about the night terrors, but just speaking briefly about the hypnagogic state, it ties into what I was talking about earlier. One really cool way to play with that, if you do have a Muse, is you can try the digital sleeping pill. And what that tends to do in these experiences is affect how you're receiving the sound while you're in the hypnagogic state. And you can actually start to explore for yourself, when are you in the hypnagogic state and what does it feel like? I said, loosely, the hypnagogic state is N1. But I think we're just discovering in this point, as far as in that brain space, when are you semi-conscious and what does it actually feel like to receive stimulus in those different states? Yeah, it's been an interesting exploration. I think this notion of having sleep states that have been defined, we have lines in the sand, and we're actually realizing that, we can come up with better definitions of, what these states of consciousness are than those.
Right. We have just one more minute left before our esteemed panelist needs to leave us. Can I call up Dr. Robillard briefly?
It's like,
yeah, I'm there.
Great.
In terms of the night terrors questions.
Yes,
yeah. So I guess that's a really fascinating question, and something that I'm guessing with technology like that of Muse that we might learn more about. So night terrors typically will happen during slow wave sleep or non-REM 3 sleep, as opposed to N1, like Chris mentioned, for the hypnagogic state. And so I guess this is a different phenomenon. But what I think is difficult, like there's a lot of hearsay, and of course there's some studies that have been done, but a core difficulty on that front is really like to capture the events when they happen, and to be able to get the person in a sleep lab at the right moment so that we can understand physiologically what happened and what led to that event, like what led to the night terror, for example, is quite a delicate and difficult task. But now if we have devices that we can use at home that people could use on multiple days, then our likelihood of seeing those events happen is quite higher. So I'm sure that we'll learn much more from these conditions as time goes, as devices like Muse get deployed in the field.
Amazing. There are many more questions that people have, and unfortunately we are out of time for today. Please, if you have questions ongoing, put them in the chat. You can stay around for another minute or two and we'll make sure that they're captured and our team will reach out and answer. You can always reach out to customer care at choosemuse.com. And if you are a researcher interested in leveraging this platform for novel research, we are so excited about all of the potential and opportunity that's available here, and the ways that we can create some really customized opportunities to query the brain while it's sleeping. So please reach out and be in touch. So on that note, thank you so much to everybody who's with us here today. Thank you to Chris and Maurice and Dr. Robillard. And I look forward to the next webinar and the next time we have an opportunity to engage together. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon, everyone.